Yeah, so I think I only came into the area of using Athena this summer, just before the academic year started. Previously, a staff member who's no longer with us had kind of signed the school up to the use of Athena, and it came from the basis that we kind of felt we had a lack of exam tracking data when it came around to the calculated and accredited grades. It was really noticeable, I think, at that time that we were in a bit of a situation. We were kind of thinking to ourselves, how accurate do we feel we are as subject teachers and as a school, I suppose, in this area? And then we looked at the benefits of just having it beyond that also. So that's where originally the sign up originally came from, noticing that gap, I suppose, that we had in the school. And then the previous staff member vacated their role just before the summer. And then when I was taken on as deputy principal, it's one of the areas I kind of asked to be involved in, because I had some previous experience in the UK of exam tracking for students.
Brilliant. So you were kind of the eager beaver. You wanted to get in on the
I like
scene here.
I like my data and my stats and kind of them type things. So I was happy to come on board.
Brilliant. That's excellent. And I suppose at the start, like, what did you hope to initially get out of the tracker?
Yeah, I suppose there was a few areas I was already working in. So before becoming deputy principal, I was a year head, and I was also the special education needs coordinator. So I was kind of doing my own system of exam tracking for the year group and for students with additional needs. And I suppose it was very time consuming. It was hard to know how accurate that data was. I was just going off kind of my own personal experiences and some other feedback from people. But I suppose having a dedicated exam tracker where a lot of like the color coding and the setting of grades, it was just a lot more centralized and kind of ease of use. So that's kind of the reason for getting involved in it, I suppose, in that way.
Brilliant. And how, I suppose, it's like so far at this point in your kind of journey with it, how have you found kind of getting onboarded and the reception from kind of staff as it's being used?
So I suppose I made a conscious decision at the very start to make it kind of like to drip feed it into the school, a combination of reasons, I suppose, with the impact of COVID and all the different changes that staff had to kind of jump on board with was a lot, I think, and staff absenteeism also was quite high. So I was kind of conscious that I didn't want to just throw something out there and hope that it stuck. So we've kind of took a slow and steady approach to get some staff buy-in. So myself and Alan, the principal, we would have initially completed some training on the use of Athena, the role of the super user, for example. And then after that, we kind of lay out a plan of what way we wanted to kind of go on this journey, I suppose, to get staff to buy in. So we arranged a whole school staff training session on Athena.
Brilliant.
We kind of went with that first of all, because we wanted people to kind of know what it is and to be aware that this is coming soon, basically. And then we kind of got everyone signed up with an activation link. Patricia's been excellent with that. So anytime a new staff member comes into the school, for example, within 24 hours, we have them signed up to Athena through Patricia's support. And then after the whole staff training session, that's where we identified our kind of groups of coordinators that we'd like to roll it out to. So we went with guidance first of all, because the use of the setting of targets we thought would be very impactful with Athena, and guidance in our school. And all schools might be slightly different, but they take on that role, working with students and setting targets. So they got a training session done before Christmas, and within a week they were meeting class groups and spending time with students and setting targets. And then since then, actually as of yesterday, we had a year group leader training session. So the role of a year head and how they could get use out of Athena. Like, for example, the filter system on Athena. So if you wanted to see students that are below progress in 3 or more subjects or 2 or more subjects, or above progress in a certain amount. So just kind of getting used to that system. That was completed yesterday. And the next stage then is the subject coordinator. That would be the next kind of cohort of staff that are in a leadership area getting further training just in their dedicated area. And then the plan would be the full rollout would happen at the start of the next academic year, where it's really embedded in our teaching, learning and assessment.
Brilliant. So lots of kind of, I suppose, planning and
Yeah,
communication like throughout the year really to get the
yeah.
different kind of groups on
We
boarded.
were going
Yeah.
to Noreen, we were going to go ahead like and just go with guidance and year heads and all that, but I just thought it'd be important for staff to get that initial training session, because when we're talking about that, actually
Mm.
know something briefly about it. And
Yeah.
over the course of the year, staff have done their own individual training with Athena. So those early kind of buy-in staff members that were really on board with it, they've jumped in, they've got individual training arranged with you and Athena, and they've kind of immersed themselves fully. But for the other staff, we just kind of want that slow and steady approach. And then next year, we hope that they're all at that level that them other staff members might be at.
Brilliant. So it's not kind of forced and kind
Yeah,
of thrown
exactly.
on them,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because more, I suppose, like every school, some teachers like yourselves will have more of an appetite, I suppose, for that kind of thing
Exactly.
than
Like we've
others,
a teacher Jared there, science and maths, and he like from the get-go, like he was like it was kind of like Christmas when he logged into Athena for the first time. He just loves that type of kind of data
Yeah.
and stats, and he'd be identified then as a member of those departments that could take the kind of lead role. So it mightn't have to be the subject coordinator. There might be someone else within your department that wants to be the leader of Athena for like maths or English or whatever subject choice it is.
Brilliant. Yeah, just from their own kind of interest,
Yeah,
yeah, point of view.
yeah.
That's super. And in terms of the guidance you mentioned, one of their big kind of uses is recording and setting the targets. And is that something like you would have done previously on pen and paper or?
Yeah, they would have had their own Excel spreadsheet
Mm.
for it basically. And again, I know it, like the color coding, I can't emphasize, I think, how important that is for, I was going to say for staff, but mainly for students and parents and guardians, because it really just makes the information clear and efficient for them to look at. I think when you're looking at spreadsheets, you're going back through reports down the years, there's a time lag. We'd use VSware, for example, and if you're going through each kind of set of exams in each year group, it just stalls the conversation. Whereas if that individual page in Athena and you put that up for a 6th-year student, you're all looking at that one page. It's color coded. It's easy to understand. And then I suppose the graph in relation to the setting of the targets, the students, that marks on the graph as well. And just seeing what the students setting for themselves. Is it realistic? Is there a lot of work to be done to get to it? And actually not being ambitious enough, them type of conversations can then come from that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, no, that's ideal. And like we were chatting about previously, it's just, I suppose, it's just so easy, I suppose, having information in the one place that if you previously had, aptitude test results, you'd be kind of going back to the file drawer or
Yeah,
searching an
yeah.
email, but hopefully
Even
having it
like the
all in
CAT
one
4
stop
or in
shop.
the CAT 4s, the NGRTs, PTMs, they're like some of the testing we do in the school. And previously they would be like stored with a school code. And you're going back years to check it each year cohort, you're flicking through, whereas now you're just going to that one student on Athena. That information's there alongside their progress over time and exams too. So it just really centralizes everything for us.
Brilliant, excellent. And I suppose in terms of like the learning curve, like in how you find, I suppose, getting yourself ramped up, how did you find that?
Yeah, I suppose I love data and stats, but I'm a little bit what's the word? I don't want to say inept when it comes to use of IT at times, but I seem to have a lot of mishaps with the use of IT, I'll put it that way. And probably enough that it's probably me that's the fault for that now at this stage. I can't explain the technology. So I would have been a little bit apprehensive, I suppose, about the quantity of it all. Like, and I was just thinking, like, we've nearly 1,000 students, like, and am I responsible for all of this? And what happens if there's something not done on it that's correct, and et cetera, et cetera. So what's really helped is linking in with Patricia, giving the step-by-step guide of how to transfer the data from VSware over to Athena. So now, like, I've set myself a calendar after every either October mock or summer or Christmas exam, depending on the year group. By the week after them exam results are uploaded onto VSware, I'll do the syncing of that over to Athena. And I from my own experience, I think it's important that there is only 1 or 2 people in each school that takes on that role. I think if you want the staff to buy into it, teachers and year heads, you kind of want them focusing on the actual students' information and not the uploading and the kind of the background, I suppose, work that goes into it. So I think just alleviating that from staff and taking on that role myself just means that when I'm pushing it out to staff, they know that's already done. I think that's kind of worked well, and I've learned a lot from doing that too. So
brilliant. No, that's it. Like, and that's the kind of the goal, I suppose, as well, is that, even for the super user, that kind of maintenance, like it's not cumbersome, it's not taking up a lot
yeah,
of time, and at
yeah.
those points in the year as well. So that's brilliant.
Alan, as our principal, would be kind of like the backup. So if I was to be
Mm.
absent for any reason or anything like that, it would be Alan that would step in. I think just having that kind of that buffer, I suppose, is helpful, I suppose, to
Yeah,
have.
absolutely. Yeah, that's really, really good. And I suppose, do you have any advice then, so kind of based on your experience then, for other schools, if they're kind of just setting about rolling it out?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the time. I suppose we are rolling it out when COVID was still, obviously it's still at play, but it does feel like in the last couple of weeks in our school anyway, that we're slowly getting back to like lockers are back out, for example. There just seems to be that kind of vibrant feel about the school again that was there before. So it just probably depends on that individual school and where they're at and what current system they're using. As I said, we would have had probably Fiesware, and then we would have used Excel spreadsheets, but we just felt it wasn't centralized enough for us. Other schools might be using different systems. What I just say is just to compare and contrast that with Athena. If you are like, what are the values of what you're currently using and what Athena can offer? Because there might be room for your current systems to still play a role in what you're doing, dependent on the way that school operates. But I just find for us, we're trying to fully immerse ourselves onto Athena, take away duplication of work for staff. So Fiesware is used for reports and for uploading of results, and then we transfer that over to get the clear centralized picture on Athena.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I think as well, like a key theme that has kind of cropped up with you yourself and a kind of few schools is just that delegation part as well, so that it's not kind of, on one or two people. You obviously have a nice strategy in your school where you do have different kind of groups that are
Yeah.
leaders kind of in place.
I think if you identify certain people in certain departments, like if you've got a large guidance team, but someone might be really keenly interested in the type of data and kind of using it through software, then maybe that's the first point of call before you go to the whole department training, because you need them people, I suppose, to buy into what you're trying to get them to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. And I suppose a common question we get then from a lot of schools is, do they show the students, I suppose, the tracker, be that they're kind of just their actual performance or indeed the expectations. And so how does your school go about that?
Yeah, I suppose, certain schools might feel differently about it, in terms of GDPR, ethical areas of concern and things like that again. But look, at the end of the day, students and parents and guardians and staff can all access scores on Fiesware or whatever school system you're using usually, or to get the report sent home. So it's not as if you're changing or manipulating any data or anything like that. So I've personally used it with some students. So to give you an example, we had a 6-year student that was really concerned about reaching a quota of CAO points. So I sat him down, we had a look at his tracker, and we kind of looked at, right, how can we get you towards a realistic kind of CAO points to get you on some of them courses you're looking at doing. And instead of just saying in English, we're going to just make this jump from 60 to 80, we kind of made short-term targets. So we would have said to him at the start, okay, for the October assessments, let's try and start closing the gap that you're working towards, and then again for the mocks, and then again for the leaving cert. So you're kind of setting mini steps with the student to get to their goal. And if the goal is CAO points, and courses, for someone else it might be just to get a pass or to get higher, depending on what the student's seeking. I think mini steps through the use of Athena. And then I'd go back, so after his next exam results would be loaded, we'd have a look to see, okay, has the progress been made? Look at how close we are to it now. And I think by seeing the graph on Athena, they really see how close they actually are to getting to what they're setting themselves as well. And it just gives them that visualization of it rather than just verbally kind of explaining it to them in conversation. I think some students, parents and guardians as well, sometimes when you make a comment like they can do more, or I think they're capable of getting 80, I think sometimes it can either come across or it's received as a little bit of a direct comment made without any backup factual kind of statement to it. And I think having Athena and being able to show that to the parent, guardian, or to the student, kind of that's backing up your statement that you may have made to that student. So we've brought it into parent teacher meetings recently, for example, also to support with any kind of commentary that's made.
Brilliant. So it has that kind of objective edge to it, that's super. And like you said, it's not kind of an all or nothing goal that's way in the future for a student, like taking those incremental steps and being able to kind of look at, okay, the progress over a
Yeah,
smaller time
yeah,
window, I suppose it's just, I suppose in general for any goal that you're trying to achieve,
yeah.
that's the way to go about it, so that's brilliant. And I think for the students as well, they probably feel, much more comfort, and they're getting like
Definitely. And I think
good
the open
attention.
up a little bit as well. Like I think some like the human element of it is
Mm,
important. Like I would have previously done exam tracking in the UK, and it would have been extremely like heavily weighted on the data and not the human.
mm.
Whereas I think if a school is rolling out Athena, I'd like to get across the point that it's important to remember there's a human on the other end of the data and that they might be going through something. So when you notice a real dip, if someone's progressing, and suddenly there's a big dip, that could be a correlation to something there that's going on in their home life, personally or socially. And I think it's a way of finding that out, because some students have kind of said, oh, just before them exams, X, Y, or Z has happened. And I think it kind of gives you then that conversation starter about, okay, is there any help you need with that? So it's not just that it's purely data and for exam tracking progress. I think if you use it in a certain way, you can kind of get the human element support out of it too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And on both sides, I suppose, for the student and the teacher, it doesn't kind of completely negate your own professional expertise. And like you
Yeah.
said, even with that example, you're the one that kind of knows when to show, the tracker
Yeah.
to a
Yeah. I think,
student.
yeah, as
So
long as you know if a certain sensitive time, it mightn't be the time to sit down with a
mm,
student and talk about that, so just using professional judgment, yeah, would be important.
brilliant, excellent. And I suppose, has there been any surprise findings, anything you haven't expected to get from the tracker that you have?
Yeah, just some of the students, like perceptions, like we all have them, I suppose, of certain individuals. And I think some staff have been surprised about either the progress certain students are making or the lack of it,
Mm,
in terms of when they come into the school to where they're at now. For example, I think like for those students maybe getting 40, 50%, I think you really see on Athena that that's actually a massive progress for that student, because they like the color coding of it, you can see that that's above the potential. Whereas if
mm.
you just take 40 or 45, some people just take that as a grade that's not, it's not exactly high achieving, but it's high achieving for that student. And I think that's where it's helpful having the color coding, and the, the data to back it up, I suppose.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's such a great message. And it is something hopefully that is becoming more important in Ireland, that every student, doesn't have to achieve 600
Yeah.
points, to do their best. So hopefully, yeah, it does kind of empower students to follow their own path and do
Yeah.
what
And
they can
another
do as
one,
their
Noreen, just
best.
briefly on that one, I suppose, would be there's a student who would have had a bit of a dip. And it
Mm,
kind of really stood out. And we were just kind of, we were digging for information on it. And he was able to explain that he's taken on a lot with playing county Gaelic, and many areas of extracurricular. And he's kind of actually noticed that it's actually had an impact. And now he's maybe
mm,
taken on a little bit much. So he's just trying to scale back in a few, instead of representing the school across the board, picking one sport, for example, because he's actually realized now that there actually has been an impact on his grades. So little kind of caveats, I think, like that. When you dig into the data, there's that personal information that can kind of come out from it.
brilliant. Yeah, that's a great example. That's brilliant, Eddie. And I suppose the last one then we kind of usually ask is just, I suppose, in terms of if when you have an issue, what kind of channels of support do you kind of is your go-to with Athena?
Yeah, so I suppose I usually operate a lot through email,
Mm.
and it's mainly been Patricia or yourself, Noreen, that I've been contacting. And look, I'm not a salesperson for Athena or anything like that, but like I've rarely not had communication back within 24 hours of solving something, whether it was a grade missing for a student, or the group's changed to a different teacher, or the class list has changed, the uploading of exam results. It's solved within 24 hours. If not, it's probably solved within 2 to 3 hours, to be completely honest with you. That's our experience so far, which has been excellent. And I think that's important, because I work with other software companies in other areas, and delays can have a massive impact, because when you only get certain time during the week, and if you've kind of penciled in that I'm going to do a Tina work at a certain time, and if something's not resolved, it could be another week by the time you get back to that. And then that's having an impact on staff who are trying to
Mm.
access that information. It's not up to date. So I think that speed of action and response that we've had has been a great help, I think.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that's super ready. And like you said, I suppose that's kind of in our minds too, that teachers have such a limited time in their day, and if they have a blocker, then like, it's obviously you don't want to be waiting weeks,
Yeah.
for someone to come back to you. So that's great to hear. And we were chatting, yesterday, and you're going to be an academic tracking expert yourself soon. You're doing a thesis on
Yeah, unfortunately for my
academic.
sins, I am doing one at the moment, and I picked the sort of title of it is, geez, I should remember this off the top of my head, shouldn't I? The whole, it's sorry, oh, I phrase it now. Let me get it completely right for you. The rollout of exam tracking for students with additional education needs.
Wow.
So I focus on that cohort because I didn't want to do, we have 1,000 students. I thought it'd be too wide of a net to be focusing on. And I've always had an interest in my courses that I've completed and through my experience as an additional education needs coordinator in that area. And I think it's a difficult area to gauge the progress of certain students because some of the complications and additional needs that go along that journey for the student. So that's the area I focused on. So I'm using Athena as the exam tracking element of that, the students in our school for additional education needs, and just doing some surveys on parents and guardians and staff. And a lot of questions are around the area of Athena.
Yeah, brilliant.
On it, Noreen, now I refer to Athena at the start, and I have to keep on saying the exam tracking system then, because I was told by my supervisor that I was coming across like I was a salesman for Athena. So just for ethical purposes, it's exam tracking system, I think, is what I'm using throughout.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's just great to kind of hear, you're passionate about that. And I'm sure if there's anything we can do to help, we'd love to kind of do anything we can for you. But
thanks very
that's
much.
wonderful, Eddie. I suppose we've gotten a few questions in just from teachers who maybe couldn't make it, or just they sent it in beforehand. And one is just on how do you kind of engage teachers using the tracker as a communicative piece to parents?
To parents, yeah. So a recent example, I suppose, is something I do every Monday here in the school is the weekly news. So staff would receive an email on Monday morning with some of the key information for the upcoming week about meetings, CPD, extracurricular events that are on, etc. So in the lead up to a recent parent-teacher meeting, I would have taken a screenshot and cropped out kind of any like student name or anything like that of Athena. A couple of examples, different examples, students that are above, students that are maybe below, and then kind of a bit of a mixed bag one, I suppose. And I kind of would have just given some commentary of how staff could use that at a parent-teacher meeting. So, for example, there was a student that was below potential in all but 2 of his subjects. And just that I was advising staff that when they are using that commentary of, I think he's got more to offer, or I think his ability isn't reflected, that can turn into a little bit of a conflict in a parent-teacher meeting conversation sometimes, because I think it can be taken personal sometimes. So just I'd advise staff, here's how you could use it, but displaying the image, and this is example commentary you could use to support it. So staff advised me that some of them were then using that software, using Athena, displaying the page of the parents, being able to make the comments, and then use the data as the kind of the factual side to back up those statements. And they felt that it alleviated any of the conflict and actually led to a more constructive conversation about, okay, what can we do to get the student back on? Or for the student that was above potential, why is this happening? How can we keep this going? Basically, is there one subject where it's not happening? What can we do in that one subject to make sure it's happening across the board? Them type of conversations are able to come from it. So I just think drip feeding it out before a pivotal thing like a parent-teacher meeting is important. So if you are thinking of using maybe like a training session with Athena, if you had a staff meeting a week or 2 before a parent-teacher meeting, that could be a good time. Or if you have a system like the weekly news or whatever systems in your school, getting it out in advance and kind of giving some examples like of bank statements. And then people will use their own language, but just giving them that kind of bank statement, I think helped a little bit.
Definitely. And just, I suppose, leading by example, and like many teachers and staff might want to kind of do that, but they may not know how to start, So I suppose it's nice to have you as a kind of a hands-on person, and giving those kind of key examples. That's really, really great.
Our learning support team in the school, Noreen, as well, they'd like get a lot of kind of support out after the parent-teacher meetings, because the feedback and then also the performance of the students, that would kind of help gear their supports that they put in place for that student, if it's subject specific, if it's across the board, what's the reason. So it kind of feeds into different areas in the school also.
Brilliant. Excellent. Super. And then we have another question about, do you use it on a whole school level?
Yeah, so I suppose all staff are aware of it, and the plan is that it'll be used at a whole school level starting in the next academic year. So it's available for whole school level at the moment, but the way we've kind of drip fed it out is that we're building leadership capacity slowly over the year. Everyone has access to it, so some people are kind of flying off with use of it. Other people are still a little bit unsure and need a little bit further support. So we're planning more CPD. And then the plan is that next year it'll be just part of our teaching and learning committee with assessment as a part of that, basically. And it'll be a key part of it.
So it'll be quite embedded, I suppose. But by that stage, super excellent. And then the last one that we've got sent in then was, how do you use the tracker to raise aspiration in students?
Yeah, I suppose that it would come a lot from the setting of targets and the meeting with students. So as I said, guidance take a lead in that in our school. But every teacher is a leader of that in their own classroom. So I would have seen teachers, for example, during a certain lesson, bringing some students up, sitting them down, having a look at it and go, okay, what can we do to try and increase this area? And again, I'd recommend a slow and steady, that you just don't go to, right, how can we get you from 60 to 80? Can we get you from 60 to 70, 70 to 80, over time, over the course of that academic year? Again, some teachers will drive that on straight away. I think some of them might need a little bit more time and experience of using Athena before they feel comfortable. But that, I think it's the purple one, if I'm right, on Athena for the student target.
Yes, that's right.
That's key on the graph, because I think it sets realistic aspirations for students when they're having the conversation with staff, because we all know those students that will say, I want to go from like 55 to 95, or I'll pull out the bag when the exam starts. But sitting them and showing them, like, this is the gap at the minute. We need to start closing this if you are to get to that. I think that helps with raising the aspirations. And it's important, I suppose, that you're not just doing it for those looking to get to the 1995s, that it could be someone getting from 35 to 45, or whatever it is that for that student, that's kind of their aspiration, I suppose.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah.
And I suppose the last one I'd say in that, Noreen, is that, again, sometimes it is the student setting the target, and the staff should remember that it doesn't impact the progress that's done on Athena with the color coding. That's only the student that set that. So it might be unrealistic for some people, but it doesn't have an impact on the data. It's only setting a target, basically.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, that it is a kind of a student-led expectation rather than any kind of the modelling. No, that's perfect. And I suppose just tying in with that, Olivia has a question. She says, hi, Eddie, just wondering, does guidance then feed back the targets to the relevant subject teachers?
Yeah, so guidance emailed at a staff meeting to kind of advise everyone this is what they're doing. And they started with fifth years, I think it was, and they met them as a group, and they'd walk through the targets on it. And they would have done this anyway, but they would have done it through Excel, and it wouldn't have been really centralized across the board. And then they would advise staff that student target grades in first year, second year, third, whatever year group it was that was completed at that time, are now up to date. So then when staff log into, if you're a teacher of maths and you log into your second year maths group, you would then see that the target grades have been set by the students then. So guidance took the lead in it in our school. Again, it might be different in different schools, and then advised staff once it was completed. And then the next time staff logged in, they would see the column then beside it on the right-hand side of, these are the grades the students have selected.
Brilliant. Super. Brilliant. And thanks, Olivia, for your question. So I think that's kind of all of our questions for you, Eddie, from the hot seat, so you can relax now.
No worries.
But
I talk 100 miles an hour, so apologies, and a strong, loud accent. So apologies if anyone needs any translations or anything like that.
But it's all great information, and exactly, I think, what the schools, they want to hear how it's gone for you in a positive kind of rollout. So it's all been really, really valuable. And if anyone has any other questions now, feel free to kind of turn on your camera and come in and join the conversation. If not, we just say a big thanks again to Eddie for his time and all of his support. It's been great working with you, Eddie, and definitely, anything that you do see, if there's a gap in what you think, the feature that you might like to see in the tracker, please do come back to us. That's something we really kind of encourage, and especially, I suppose, yourself, you're in the nitty gritty with your thesis, and you're kind of thinking about this stuff a lot, so please do. We're more than happy to kind of collaborate, and in that sense, know. So,
Yeah.
but thanks so much, Eddie, for your time
Thanks
today.
very
It's
much,
been
Noreen.
really, really great chatting to you, and thanks everyone for joining. We'll stop the recording now. Great, Carmel's just saying thanks.